Hello, can anyone hear me? Ah, are we live? I think we're live. Woo! Okay, we seem to be live. Excellent. We've had some people here. Hello, everyone. This was it was quite a wild ride to get this working, but we got there. Cool. Okay. Oh, we got some more people in. Hello, everyone. Um, right. So before I begin, little explanation of what happened. So I guess you could say that in the month since the last live stream, YouTube's decided to have a change of heart and basically require you to download a streaming program. Now, it gave you a list of, I think, 5 free ones to use, and I had to basically download one on the spot. Now, the first one they suggested to download was rubbish. It was utterly atrocious. So I decided to cancel that. Found Streamlabs, which I am now using, which is a godsend. Hopefully everything going smoothly. Yeah, hopefully everything will. So yeah, everything now looks set up. Everything looks good. So we shall begin properly this time, with hopefully no technical issues to be had at all. Now, as you see for the live stream title, it is Q&A, readings, and birthday stuff. Now, I know this won't come as a surprise to some of you, but 2 days ago, on May 8th, it was my birthday, and I thought I'd show off my little collection beforehand. See the haul. Now, first one I got, these were all... Oh! Little context there, that was in the comments. When the evil Girl Scouts plus an angry ghost man can't put a stop to your stream the second time. We'll get to them soon. So, my birthday haul so far was an audiobook, which was Doctor Who Marco Polo, Big Beast, as you see. Nice, historical, so that will probably be about 4 hours to listen to. This brilliantly underrated anime, Blood Blockade Battlefront. Or, if anyone's got access to Funimation, go and watch it, it's brilliant. My first foray into Pokemon, with Pokemon Shield on the Nintendo Switch. And then see if you can... Hello all. See if you can detect a bit of a theme going on with the next one. Dune by Frank Herbert, 50th edition version. Frank Herbert's Dune, the mini-series. And Children of Dune, Dune Apocalypse for some stupid reason, in the UK, on DVD. Are you detecting a theme developing? I couldn't. So, what I also got was a big box from Amazon. And what do we have in this? We have a ton of books. All the thank you very much for the late birthday. All non-author copies of Trem number 2. Very exciting. So when we open the shop, we can now sell some copies. Now, another thing I wanted to do before we begin. Now, in April, when I did my first stream, that was meant to be the Sci-Fi Scarborough event on that day, but because of COVID-19, that couldn't happen, so instead I thought I'd do my book launch stream on here. Now, I thought what would be quite... thank you, Sammy. What I thought would be quite bit of a laugh to do is just sort of explain what the plan was at Sci-Fi Scarborough, which was that I'd already booked a table, and we were going to deck it all out, make it very atmospheric. Thank you for the belated birthday, Shane. Deck it all out and put some props on it, some things, and get a few copies sold, hopefully, of both Trem's book 1 and 2. Now, what we planned was, I had about 15, at that stage 15, it's probably nearer 20 now, pieces of artwork commissioned from Trem, and I thought it would be a good idea to get a digital photo frame and have the artwork sort of done on a loop, so people can sort of see that as they go along and think, "Oh, what's that?" So that is still the plan for next year. And by the time that Sci-Fi Scarborough was called off, we'd already gotten the most of the stuff ready, but we hadn't got the digital photo frame or a couple of other things, and I hadn't had my big cosplay for that year sorted. So next year. And it's still the plan to carry this over into next year as well. But one thing that I thought I definitely had to include was a piece of artwork done by, and I want to get his name right, because if I don't, I'll feel pretty bad. This is by UrbanKnights_ST on Twitter. I believe it's the same on Instagram as well. If anyone's interested, I'll post about this afterwards and I'll drop a link to his work. But he did a commission for the villain of Book 1, which was actually done on card form. So as you can see here, this was a very, very excellent card of the artwork actually physically done, and that was posted. That was delivered through the door, which is not probably the postcard most people were expecting. Then probably the strangest thing to come out of this was when we went to, of all things, one of the local pet shops, and we decided to have a look in just because I felt like it, to be perfectly honest. I thought at the very least it'll be a free zoo experience, you can have a look at things. But what I didn't expect to find was, if you pay attention to the card, you'll see that he has the skull mask. And so walking along, and we came to the end of one of the aisles by the reptile area, where everyone's put all your paraphernalia for all your tanks. And then we found this. Now we thought, this isn't exactly 100% to the art card, but we thought that is eerily similar and sort of a similar size to what was in the picture. So what we decided was that come next Sci-Fi Scarborough, whenever that will be, this will be again a sort of fake prop, as it were, from the book. So you can almost sort of say all the artworks coming along have the card and have this to almost say this is the mask that once belonged to said character. So again, as random purchases go, quite up there, but I don't know what the woman behind the counter was thinking when she saw us rocking along going, "Can we just have a scroll, Matt? Can we just have a scroll, please?" So that was, we got a lot of entertainment out of that. But yeah, that's it's definitely quite useful for the next one. And I've started doing some photo ops with this as well, so that might appear sooner or later. So, if anyone has any, questions or Q&A stuff, please do drop them in the comments, because the theme I wanted to do for this particular one was obviously still talk about the books and stuff, but also talk about the antagonists. Originally, but broken after his defeat. Yes, Sunny, very good observation. But I thought, talk about the antagonists, which was only something I came up with doing yesterday, because I was originally going to read one chapter from this, but then I decided, actually no, I'll do something that will also tie into book 2 as well. We'll jump into that in a minute, but if anyone has anything else they want to drop, whether it be about the writing process or anything at all, please feel free to do so. While I keep hydrated. If not, I shall go into a bit of a ramble about the villains. Now, for book 1, the villain... Oh, getting front. The book 1 villain is was so... Let's see how the phrasing was as well, because I love the phrasing. The angry ghost man is the main villain of book 1, Trem, Treman, and he is the main character's the titular character, Trem. He is her grandfather, who had passed away and is now as a ghost, and he is, to say he's not a very pleasant chap is quite an understatement, really. And he has always been, especially in the early chapters, he had always been the thorn in Trem's side, and always the one annoying thing that was just kept, getting at her when she's just trying to, live a life or whatever. She will always have this one annoyance or one voice getting in at the side of her head, and that would always be him. Now, there is a lot more sinister things going on there. I won't reveal everything because of the plots to the books, but what I will say is there will be a video coming out on this channel very soon, which will be a lore video, which will sort of talk about the culture, the the non-human race that appear in this book, the Manzazu, their sort of potted history, so to speak, and sort of how they got to where we find them in the books, because what they went through was a civil war, and the civil war was between a group that were loyal to the Queen, who the ruler of the society, and against a splinter group who basically decided that humanity that they are basically sharing the earth with should be, if anyone's Doctor Who fans, think of the Silurians, because they view planet Earth as theirs, and they want to basically take control. So that created a whole civil war, which ended within living memory of book one for a lot of the people in there. So they are very much a society that has just about recovered from a conflict. Now, what I was interested in exploring in Trem 1 and 2 is the idea of villains who were made villains because they've sort of been sold on an idea or a series of thoughts, basically, which is as described, it is the human race really worth having to stay out the way for? Because all this stuff, all the Manzazu stuff's all in the shadows. It's all. Oh, thank you, Vordy. I'm glad someone got the reference. But the Manzazu race basically lives in secret alongside the human race, but so minutely that no one would ever notice. That's the plan. Barely have any contact with them until it comes time to basically ferry their souls to the afterlife, hence the ghost aspect. So when it comes to the villains, their sort of core idea is we want to basically continue on where the Civil War left off, and then we will progress from there, and the end goal is to create this power balance where the Manzazu come out on top and the humans come out on bottom. Now, with Trem, he's sort of kept this whole idea very close to his chest. This isn't something that he talked about, and his whole thing with that is a secret. And the sort of calling card of them are the skull masks, which I think I saw on a comic somewhere, I believe, and sort of like the idea of a sort of group that wear animal masks. I think it was jackal masks or something, which was where it originally was inspired from. But so in book one, that aspect of him is remaining hidden. But while he's sort of going off and sort of being a bit of an arse throughout the book, the one thing that he's done in secret is to train up the characters that you see on the front of the book. Now, as you're going to see from the reading I'm doing, the villains for book 2 are basically 3 orphan girls who started out life pretty much separated from their parents through some quite tragic circumstances, and they have now spent years living on the streets as orphans, very out of Oliver Twist, and they now have been taken in by Trem, all behind back of Trem and all her family, and he's basically raised these 3 up to sort of continue on the legacy, really, of the group that he wanted to be a part of. So that basically, as villains, they've been, and I've always found this fascinating, it is of the villains who don't know they're villains, because with Trem, he was very, very adamant that what he was doing was right, because he's spent so long believing the hype. But with these 3, this is all they've ever known. So they have no reason to believe that Trem is in the wrong at all. So basically, throughout book 2, you see these 3 villains who have all, throughout their entire life, been fed lies. But when it comes to the crunch, the real sort of dilemma with the characters is, do they believe do they believe the hype that was told to them now that they've gone out? Now that they've are actually starting to enact their plan, where does it go from here? Now I'm not going to obviously say when because you'll have to buy the books, but that is basically the villains for books 1, 2, and 3 sorted, and then from there, the sort of future we'll see where it goes. But there was an interesting amount of time that went into sort of working out what the villains are going to be and how they sort of interact with other characters. Can they be reasoned with? Do they want to be reasoned with? All these 101 questions that hopefully come to an interesting conclusion, which again I'm not going to say what because we don't spoil here. Pardon me. Some questions, so I'll delve into that. No, thank you, Bellum. Right, Brian. What was the creative process like coming up with the ideas for the stories and things? The creative process, I'd say, probably took about a year to do to get basically the plots of book 1, the sort of vague idea where books 2 and 3 are going, with quite a bit of book 2 actually already figured out. So that's why I was able to work in some stuff and some sort of plot points that could be carried on into the second and then the third. Sort of good idea about the way I plot, which is extremely anal plotting, where every chapter has to be sorted and sort of written out. So when it comes to structure, that's how I do it. But when creative process, yeah, coming up with ideas is a interesting one because the initial ideas themselves, sort of, you can't really. There's no real rhyme or reason where any of them came from. You know, they come from various places, which is why I always say, if you want to create something or if you're not particularly sure where you want something to go, the best thing you can do is just absorb as much sort of fiction as possible. It doesn't necessarily need to be books, because I know when I was doing the early creative process of this, I think a lot of the inspiration came from animated TV shows, video games, and sort of concepts and things that I'd read about from other books. And I think stuff like in the last stream I know I mentioned Neil Gaiman, Terry Pratchett, now recently Frank Herbert, all these people that sort of have these ideas and these concepts that you sort of want to immerse yourself in and see if you can be inspired by anything. Not steal, obviously, but get inspired by. Because I'm one of these people that inspiration can come anywhere. I go to a holiday in Edinburgh and I've plotted out an entire 4th book, which did happen. So when it comes to sort of, because I know whenever anyone says, where do you get your ideas from, to any author, you're always guaranteed a different response. But for me, I think just anywhere, really, because you're always guaranteed to get something that will be engaging, something that you can switch on with, and through that you can see where it goes. Video games and visual media can really be helpful as inspirations. Yeah, especially when you look at how, just like off the top of my head, if you look at how something like Elder Scrolls, how much of an expansive world that they can create, and, you know, as far as, you know, ideas and stories come along, that's a lot packed into even just, say, Skyrim. And the good thing about interactive media as well is you have that ability to immerse yourself in that world, so it has to be more advanced because you're interacting with it if you want to make it more realistic. Now, what was the other one? What were the inspirations behind the Trem, or writing in general? I'd say that if we started with writing in general, as I said, I've mentioned who my sort of big inspirations are, but another one I'd say that would be another inspiration as well is, again, focusing just on Doctor Who. There was a rare book that I read which was called Lung Barrow by Mark Platt, which I was fortunate enough to get a PDF copy of before it became ridiculously expensive. And much like Terry Nation, much like Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, these are like brilliant concepts that will be mental to describe. Like if you look at Terry Pratchett, you know, if you just heard Discworld, you know, it's a turtle with an entire globe on its back. You know, that's a mental concept. And then you have Douglas Adams as well. Just one line of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy could sound ridiculous, but when you have the writing ability to be able to pull off mental concepts, then, I always think you should go for it. That's why I've had sort of people ask me, is this idea weird? And I've always said there's no such thing as a weird idea. Just go for what you feel confident writing. BioWare used to be great for inspiration, yeah, especially. How do you make... Oh, more questions. How do you make a character feel realistic? For me, I'd say the one good thing about how I've written it is that and it's especially going to be difficult for something like Trem because you've got the human world and then you've got the Menzazu world. These are two separate things. One's grounded in reality, the other one's fantasy. So the one thing I sort of did to try and ground them both in a believable reality was with Gabby. She is sort of, I wouldn't say a self-insert by any means, but I would say that I've put quite a bit of myself into Gabby Morgan as a protagonist, and certainly stuff that she does how I would want to react in a situation but not necessarily be able to. So she as a protagonist sort of came about from a lot of myself, people I know, sort of other protagonists that I've sort of been exposed to that are similar, who've had similar experiences, and then kind of take it from there, especially as there's a romance angle. But with Trem, when she sort of comes into the human world, she experiences as much sort of confusion and strangeness and sort of sense of what's going on here as Gabby does to her world. So that's sort of running those two parallel is a good idea. And what I don't know how useful advice this would be, because I don't know how this would, if this only pertains to Trem or whether this would be useful for anyone else. But what I found quite useful was the concept of the unreliable narrator, which if anyone's watched Legion, the X-Men series, that's a good example of where you have a character who isn't, or a narrator that isn't an all-seeing omnipotent force. It's almost like a first-person perspective where everything isn't quite laid out straight. So when it comes to Trem showing Gabby all the stuff on the Manzazu side, she's not an expert on it. She's not actually lived that world. So as a result, you're kind of drip-fed information, and not every single thing about it is always true. So when you come to see more of it in later books and later stories, you sort of think, okay, well, looking back on it, that might not be true. So when it comes to relatable characters, really, I'd say sort of how they are given a scenario or how they're given a problem, how they themselves respond to that, that I think is where you should look for to have relatable characters. Can they be sort of the author surrogate and be kind of the author surrogate, the reader surrogate by getting into the situation? Can you follow them in a natural way? And even if that does resort to you having to say, well, how would I approach this situation, or how would I think would be a logical position? So you're not basically creating anything out of left field that concerns the audience or confuses them. Right, do you have a music playlist of your stories, and does music play a significant part in your writing process? If so, what were some of the themes in a playlist for Trem? Good thing about that is I do actually have a playlist for Trem saved, and it's well over 100 tracks, but I find that for the writing playlist, I found that there are some good things that help me as a writer that I need to rely upon that, which is when it comes to the writing playlist, I've got various sort of themes. Some are music that relates to characters that I can sort of pinch from. So I know for Treman there's quite a bit of Murray Gold Doctor Who music, and even some Evangelion themes, so basically big orchestral music. But when it comes to basically I found that if I want to write a scene and emulate a certain feel to it, then I will find music that reflects that feel. So in book 1 there's a scene where Gabby and Trem, and this has been illustrated as well, have a slow dance, and it ends with them sharing their first kiss as a couple. So when I was writing that, I listened to a lot of basically a lot of romance songs. So a lot of George Benson's and James Ingram's, a lot of these sort of slow, quite emotional pieces. And then when it came to like for example a fight sequence in the second book, I looked to the musicals and found a brilliant finale for the musical Chess, which is very aggressively sung, very emotional, and I felt that that helped get the ideas to paper as well. These are people slogging it out. Let's kind of get in your head that kind of mood of desperation and the odds piling up against you. So hopefully when you've put it on paper, you've sort of got that idea in your head. And if you're able to visualize what you're writing, definitely visualizing it too. And this is for all of them. Letting the music in the playlist kind of act as your background music, I've felt has definitely helped me. But for Trem, were there any other ideas or series that you worked on beforehand that you wanted to / still want to publish? There's a story that I've still been hanging on to. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's something along the lines of Ward 29, I think it's called, which is 4 people in the UK who volunteer, and they'll come from different walks of life. You've got 2 people who are living rough on the streets who have got in with gangs. You've got one person who's the sort of typical wealthy sort of daughter of socialites, and then you've got the person just sort of trying to make do in a environment that she's not familiar with. And these 4 people who basically would have no reason to be interacting with each other would get together and sort of sign on to a scheme that the government puts in, or a department, scientific department, which is we give you a, say, common cold serum, we give you a stupid amount of money, and then we'll monitor you. But of course it's not a serum it's not a serum for any viral cures or anything. What it is basically like Captain America. It's almost like super soldier serum, but in reality it's when they wake up after the procedure, they've all got various different superpowers. I think one's got fire ability, one's got advanced speed, one's got electrical manipulation, which plays havoc with her Instagram. And the sort of story then goes on to these 4 people who, again, have no sort of reason why they would be interacting. Personality-wise, they're all completely different. They then sort of having to band together to sort of work out what's gone on and sort of what is this government facility, why are they wanting to inject us with superpowers. And it sort of then goes on to they aren't the first people that have done this, and it sort of progresses from there when they meet other test victims. And yeah, that was one part, and I think that's the only other one. I've sort of been playing around with Bellum knows. I think the only other idea I had was a sort of take on demonic possession, but if it wasn't anything bad like The Exorcist, if it was a reverse where it was someone who's sort of been taken over by a demon or some otherwise evil thing who actually sort of helps improve her life rather than make it really awful. That was only a sort of passing idea, though. I'm not quite sure if I want to... Well, if I do go anywhere with it, it's going to have to be fleshed out a lot more. Just answer a few more. So, how long do you think you're going to go with the series? Do you still want to explore this universe with yours, even after you're done writing the books proper? I think so, yeah. I've got a lot of books planned, if I'm being honest. So we've got the 3 books planned, first 2 already done, and that is the Gabby and Trem story. The 4th one is going to be a lot shorter, and that will be called The Duty of a Queen, which will be a prequel, which will be one night during World War One, told from the perspective of the Queen character. Book 5 will be sort of returning to the universe of books 1 to 3 by following a different character as the main character. And then the other stories that I've got onwards sort of take place in and involve characters from book 3, which hasn't been released yet. So there's a lot going on in this brain with what's to come. So the plan is, I think, to sort of see all these ideas through and then see where it goes. Let's see, have we got any other questions? Right, if I haven't answered your question, feel free to repeat it, just in case I've lost it. Right, I think I shall find chapter 12, and we'll see exactly what's been going on with the villains. Oh, that's good. Had a moment there. What is your favourite character archetype, if any? Personally, I have a soft spot for the noble demons, where the villains are honourable. Actually, yeah, that is a very good one. I'd say what I do like are characters that sort of go against the expectations and almost go against type, because there are 4 ghosts that are the good guys in book 1 and feature in book 2, and I like to think that they all start off as character archetypes that then throughout they kind of have their expectations changed. So we have Jenny Abernathy, who is a actress who sort of parallels Marilyn Monroe a bit. Now she, by her own admittance, starts off as kind of what people would assume as being the ditzy... No, thank you, Bella. The kind of ditzy actress who kind of has her head in the clouds, but in reality she is incredibly down to earth, and it can be quite the plotter as well when people aren't looking. And then we've got Skye Bloodworth, who is a female pirate based on someone from real life. I still haven't looked up her name. I think it's Elizabeth Kilgrew. And again, she appears to be the sort of, if anyone's seen Full Metal Alchemist, she appears to be the Olivia Armstrong character. Very brash, very no-nonsense, very quick to get you at sword point. But in reality, she has the tender side that doesn't come out normally unless it's with Skye. Abhay Singh, who is a Indian soldier, he is the sort of glue that holds the group together. He is the sort of jovial, good-natured man who gets everyone together, keeps the momentum up, and sort of gets everyone energised and going. But again, much like Skye, he has his own sort of demons that he seldom lets anyone see, but when it comes to life or death situations, they do come out. And everyone assumes that Thomas Hogarth, who is the foppish sort of Shakespearean actor who is a natural born coward and hasn't had a single fight in his life that he's won, yet somehow is able to hold his own and sort of again be the morality figure despite what everyone thinks of him. Those are pretty good character types. And again, what you'll see, this is possibly a spoiler, I don't know, very quiet. A big character type I like is the villains who are able to redeem themselves. You know, there are villains that will always be evil and will always stay evil, or our perception of it anyway. So there's a very fine line about what we consider to be evil and what's a protagonist and what's an antagonist. It's a debate that can go on for ages, but ones that kind of tread the line and kind of not quite fit into either categories at first and then have to work together because they have to or because they think that this would save a life or whatever, those are definitely the kind of antagonists that are interesting to me, as well as we said, the ones that are just pure evil. Right, let me just see how many pages this is, because we've actually done all right for time. I'm surprised I've been able to talk that long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Thrilling, isn't it? Okay. Oh yeah, love for redeemable villains. So I will go through this chapter. This is, and I'll try and do voices for this one, so you lucky people. This chapter is chapter 12 of the book, which features the first proper appearance of these three. Screen glare. these three, who, again, villains in Book 2, and this kind of explains how Treman met them and how they proceeded to be taken in by him and basically believe everything he says. And again, I'm going to try voices so this should be fun. So, Trem, Chapter 12, The River Flows. Once Treman had entered the mirror, he appeared back in the decrepit sidings of the Styx, with the broken down trams and rolling stock surrounding him. Holding himself stable on one of the trucks, he glanced around at the small pool of blood which was forming as a result of his decaying, corrupted states. He lamented that the sisters would not have to see him like this, but at the same time, it would only help strengthen them. They needed to know what corrupting looked like, after all, and they needed to know to not get emotionally attacked once he slipped away. His wandering mind slipped back to the day, years ago, when he first encountered them. For the sisters, in human terms, would have felt like 12 years, given that the three of them had matured from frightened little girls to fierce warriors on the cusp of adulthood. They were all so small, filthy, and abandoned by their peers, perfect for Treman's plans. Euphrasia, capital of the Menzazu, was always a thriving place, if you had the chance to do well for yourself. Treman hated the idea of the whole civilization having to live in the shadows of the royal family. Quite literally. The grand fortress where the queen lived was perched atop a great mountain, with the bustling, thriving city below them. Thousands of Menzazi would wake up in the morning and look up at the opulent royals and grow jealous. Treman was one of them. Of course, that kind of thinking led to the war, when the divergent Menzazi, the Mutashaib, who declared an open rebellion against the royal family. Years of fighting ensued, stretching across the world. The thing that amused Treman about it to no end was that the greatest war humanity was never aware of was happening under their nose. As Euphrasia was hidden from the world by powerful Menzazu and magic, their actions and conflicts were sheltered from their primitive view. Given humanity and the Menzazu were historically violent towards each other, the witch trials being a prevalent case, it was just as well that they were able to shield their conflict away from them. The way the royal family treated humanity was another point of anger for the Mutashaib. The royals were against their subjects interacting with humans till after they died. No one really knew why, but Treman agreed with the general consensus. Human beings were much less dangerous dead than alive. The Mutashaib wanted to have the Menzazu dominate the human race, subjugate them and enslave them. After the years they were mistreated by humanity, it was only fair. And a complete Menzazuan takeover would be simplicity itself, especially if they brought... I'm going to preface this now. It says Itemu. What they basically mean is the corrupted ghosts of humans after they've gone through. It's a little preface here, but basically when you become a ghost and you cross over through the river Styx and go to the afterlife, basically if you don't make the crossing, you get turned into this sort of warped remains of a human spirit. If anyone's seen Steven Universe, think of like the corruption of the gems. So you turn into this very horrific thing. Again, if anyone's interested, I've had some artwork done of it, so I'll post it on Twitter afterwards. So yeah, that's the little preface there. If they brought the ghosts back and used them as warriors, just how things had been in the founding days of Babylon. All this was irrelevant though, as Treman watched the royal family wipe out the major clans of the Mutashaib. Treman never openly declared his clan as a member, unlike the other great clans he'd admired from a distance. If he did, it would mean that if the rebels failed, then he and his clan would be wiped out, condemned as criminals or forced into exile. Either way, his dreams of glory would be dashed. In his heart, Treman was riddled with self-contradictions. He hated the royal family, but he was obsessed with the standing of his clan. True, he hated the idea of one family having all the power, but that most likely stemmed from the idea that anyone with more power than himself was the enemy, and that he needed to snuff out. If absolute power corrupts absolutely, then yearning for absolute power has the same effect. It made Treman an angry, bitter Menzazu. It was after the war. The country was still licking its wounds. Steel-faced armoured guards were patrolling the bazaars, staffs drawn and their eyes on any sign of troublemaking. Euphrasia was under lock and key. and the last remnants of the Mutashayib escaping onto the sea to Africa or Australia, the nearest land masses to Euphrasia. Trem was walking the stone streets among the bartering Manzaza at the city's central bazaar. He glanced around at his fellow kind. They may have all been like him, born into Manzazuan blood, all wearing the same type of robe, but to him they couldn't be further apart. Trem had ambitions. He wanted to be more than this, more than the leader of some middling political clan. One daughter was a lovesick idealist, and the other had neither the intelligence or the social graces to amount to anything. He would never become anything more unless he did something about it. While buying some supplies at a stall, his attention was drawn towards the patter of small feet on the cobbled ground. Glancing around, he caught sight of a small girl who was pinching fruit from one of the stalls. She was so stealthy, the stall owner didn't even notice her. Trem looked her up and down. She wore tatty, stained and filthy clothes, and her light brown skin was hidden beneath a messy crop of pink hair, and her eyelid eyes were only just visible. She scooped a few fruit into her pocket and scampered away. Trem, who had yet to age into his craggy, elderly form, instead still thin-faced with finely chiselled features, slowly followed the girl. Following from a distance, he kept on the girl's trail. The boiling hot sun was obscured by the sandstone buildings, shielding the two from sight. Turning a corner into the dark alley, the girl came to a halt and looked behind her. Trem leapt to cover behind the corner and waited for the girl to make her move. She whistled twice, and on cue, she was joined by two others. One was pale as a sheet, with a strip of cloth tied over her eyes. Sandy blonde hair pulled back over her head and tied into a ponytail. The other had tan skin and black greasy hair, with brilliant blue, sapphire-like eyes. The thief took the fruit from her pockets and handed them out, the three of them scoffing the food up like animals. Trem glanced around the corner. They all looked so desperate, and so hungry for even the thinnest morsel. The pale one with the blindfold stopped eating. Looking up the way the girl came, the pink-haired one's head tilted. "What's wrong?" Breathing in, the girl with the blindfold let out a few seconds of silence go by. "You were followed. He's hiding behind that wall." She extends a thin, bony finger up to Trem's hiding place. The other two spun their heads around and watched as Trem stepped out from behind the wall. How could she have known? Unless... The blue-eyed one grabbed a piece of broken glass from the side of the alley and held it out in defiance. What was she going to do? Paper cut Trem to death? "Who are you? Just leave us alone. Why did you come here anyway?" Trem put his finger to his lips. Shh. He gestured his hand downwards and slowly approached them, one footstep at a time. "I'm not going to hurt you. What are your names?" The girl lowered her shard, sinking her head as she muttered her response. The pain in her voice was so evident that it would have been heartbreaking if Trem was into that soppy stuff. We're nobody." The pink-haired girl's stomach growled rather loudly, loud enough for Trem to hear. He delved into his satchel and took out a loaf of bread from the bazaar he bought for himself. He unwrapped its paper container and held it out to the blue-eyed girl. "Here, you need to eat something." The two girls turned to the blindfolded one, who gave them a nod as a response. The blue-eyed girl slowly took the bread, separating it and handing out the pieces. The three let out stifled moans of enjoyment. It was clear to them that they'd been living on the streets for years. "Where are your parents?" The three paused eating, and the two, who could see, glanced at the floor. "We have no parents. We have to make do ourselves." How interesting. Trem could hazard a guess where the blue-eyed girl came from. The lead Mutashayib clan, the Talon, were forced to evacuate Euphrasia, and she resembled the leader of that clan's wife, a fierce woman with the most gorgeous blue eyes. She must have been left behind. As for the other one with the blindfold, well, Trem knew where she was from. Pink hair or lilac eyes were new to Trem. They must have been from some nobody clan. Still, two of the three girls had some real Manzazi pedigree behind them. A thought entered Trem's head. No one would be looking for these girls. If they weren't thought dead already, then it would only be a matter of time. He leant down and addressed the three of them at once. Would you three like a comfortable bed tonight, along with a hot meal? The three moved into a little huddle, whispering between them. Trem stood back and gave them some privacy, though he was sure he knew what the answer was going to be. We don't want to cause a fuss, but... Trem interrupted and stood in front of her, kneeling down and offering her his hand. Nonsense. I'm not going to let you three starve to death on the streets. Come with me, and I'll make sure you three get shelter, food and comfort for as long as you want. As the three nodded at each other, they took his hand. Trem knew he was onto something. Children, they believe anything you tell them, and therein lies the beauty of it. All he had to do was teach them the ways of the Mutashahib, turn them into fighters, into figureheads. Maybe that could secure his legacy. Trem, the Menzazu who engineered the takeover that changed the history books. It all started with small steps and small people. Now, decades later, the sisters had grown up. Trem watched them go from frightened children into fully fledged Mutashahib warriors, training them for years after taking them in, all behind Trem's back. While his family was squandering their status, he was raising up the three sisters. They were his greatest achievements, considerably more than his actual family. But this would be their last meeting. He stopped when he reached the clearing, one of the many side turnings and dead ends in the maze that was the sticks. He whistled 3 times and waited, as planned. From the rotting bushes and shrub came 3 figures, all of varying heights. They all wore black leather outfits with scarlet sashes across their waists and weapon holsters across their shoulders. 2 of them wore masks which obscured all but the eye lines with a thin strip, while the other wore a hood and a mask that covered their entire face. Visible behind the masks of the 2, one set of deep sapphire eyes and the other lilac eyes. The sisters, now all grown up and clad in the uniform of Mutashahib assassins. They emerged from their hiding places and all sank to one knee, bowing their heads. Welcome back, the first sister said, closing her bright eyes. Trem's hand hovered over her shoulder. He spoke with a whisper. Tremolor. She glanced up at him, her eyes widening as she saw his mentor was now a twisted state, a few drops of blood from his mouth collecting on the floor. She glanced up. Tremolor tried to mask her surprise. It was against her training to become too emotionally attached. You 3 have been preparing for today. All your training has paid off, because today you 3 are official members of the Mutashahib. Tremolor. He took his hand from her and gestured to the lilac-eyed sister, Tremolee, and he moved to the hooded figure, Tremolan. Stepping back, he gave the command for all 3 to stand. All you have to do is take your vow and commence the ritual. The 3 of them reached for their weapons. The blue-eyed Tremolor took out a small silver rod which extended into a lance with a flick of her wrist. Tremolee took out her axe from her back and twirled it in her hand. Tremolan took a series of razor wires from her pouch tied to her sash. Together the 3 sisters began to recite their oath. I pledge my blood, my breath, my very life to the cause of the Mutashahib. I will live, fight and die by the laws dictated to us by those who came before us. Now and forever I swear upon my blood. They all took their weapons in one hand and removed their leather gloves. Pricking their fingers with their weapons, they allowed the blood to trickle down before igniting the weapons with red flames. The blood turned the flames yellow before fizzing out of existence. Once their weapons' flames were snubbed out, they returned them to their original holsters and slipped their gloves back on. Good. This will have to be the last time we meet, so do me proud, my pupils. Now, let's get into position. He led the 3 onto the main strip of the docklands. Tremolee leaned over to Tremolor and spoke in a hushed, excited tone. So this is it, Sis? We finally done it. Her smile was easy to make out under the mask. I was starting to think this day would never come, but we did it. We proved we were good enough. She felt Tremolan's hand on her shoulder. Sorry, I can't help getting excited at all. I mean, we're nearly there. When we start this, we're on the high road to glory. Tremolor kept her eyes locked on Tremon's back and continued to lead them. Glory is something that isn't freely gifted. It is something achieved by determination, strength, and persistence. Remember, little sister, this is only the first step in a larger plan. Trem stopped in his tracks, clenching his fist as his shoulder ached. As his shoulder arched, bones in his back and shoulders popped out of place. He held back as much of the pain as he could, though a grunt escaped his lips. Tremolor came to a halt and watched as her mentor strained, straightening out his back, causing the dislocated bones to pop back into place, scraping against each other. He attempted to regain composure, clicking his neck and shrugging his shoulders. I'm fine. That was a lie, and the sisters knew it. No one who's becoming a corrupted soul is fine. They all knew they'd be the ones to have to do it, to kill him in the end, though they were hardly going to wait in line anxiously to do it. Tremon continued down the docklands before stopping by some old bushes at the side of the docks. Tremon turned his face to the others, who struggled to hide their surprise. His left eye socket was starting to sag. His teeth were pushed hard against his top lip, and most of the hair on his head had fallen out. His jaw, combined with his teeth, were already starting to impair his speech, turning his previously well-spoken voice into a muttering. Take up positions, everyone, he ordered. Tremolly jumped across the water and landed on the other side of the docks. She hid behind a bush and readied herself by taking her axe in hand. Peering over, she watched the others at work. Tremolan took off her glove and leaned her hand into the river. She felt the currents lap against her skin, and after a few seconds she shook off the water, putting her glove back on. She made a gesture with her hand. 15 new arrivals to the Styx, arriving in 1 minute. The sisters and Tremon remained hidden as they waited for the boats to pass. After a minute exactly, the sisters caught sight of the boats. 3 full of grey cloaked figures bound for the afterlife, or so they thought. They floated across the water at a snail's pace, the people on board oblivious to what was coming. With her spear drawn, Tremolor stood from her hiding place and held on to one end. Once the first boat was in range, she threw the spear, which pierced the boat's hull, causing it to list. The cloaked figures on board were all beginning to scramble in a panic, unable to stop themselves falling into the river once the boat had capsized. Tremolly jumped out of her hiding place and landed on the second boat. Using the butt of her axe, she slammed it into one of the souls' faces, sending them into the river. She hit the bottom of the boat with her axe, causing the water to pour in at an alarming rate. No one said how much fun this was going to be, she chortled as she threw one soul out of the way and into the water, as she jumped onto the next boat, ready to repeat the sequence. The souls who did not sink to the bottom of the river desperately scrambled to the sides of the walls. When they reached there, trying to reach for the walkways, they were greeted by another of the 2 sisters, Tremolor, who held her hand out as her spear flew back into her hand. She threw the spear, which hit the ghost in the shoulder and propelled him to the bottom of the river, pinning him to the bottom while he flailed for air. Tremolan, meanwhile, pulled her razor wires tight, her glorified cat's cradle and preferred weapon. She reached down and grabbed another Itemu, wrapping her cradle around its neck, pulling it taut and choking the non-existent life out of it. Tremolly jumped back onto the walkway with her other sisters after dealing with another boat, and pausing to pluck an Itemu out of the water, choking them as she spoke. You know what? You said this would be easy, but I never figured I'd love it so much. Her bright eyes were filled with so much joy, too much for the others. Keep focused, sister, Tremolor replied as she recalled her spear. Remember, we need them all to turn Farah. That way, we can, to make sure that there's still some left. Before Tremolan could finish, Tremolly heard the unmistakable sound of a neck breaking. She looked at her victim and dropped their slumped form into the river. Oops, my mistake. Tremolan flicked her wire into the water, the end of it wrapping around an escaping Itemu's leg. She pulled them back and knelt by the water's edge. She grabbed the figure by the head and smacked it against the walkway. The form then sank to the bottom of the dark water. Tremon observed the carnage with interest. Honestly, he was proud of them, but it wasn't something he was ever going to tell them. They were strong, more powerful than other Mutashayib assassins. They wouldn't be so easily killed, for one. Trem taught them well, and that they were the best of his students. When they knew no other life than homelessness, it teaches someone to be bitter at those who rule, who abandoned them, and left them to starve on the streets. Decades of fueling that bitterness helped no end for the sisters. Plus, they were closer than friends. Though they were not biologically related, their bonds were so deep. The thought of his impending demise was considerably lessened when Trem observed how far the sisters had come, and how far they would go. The last of the 15 Atemu had been slain by the sisters, who dragged the drowning forms from the river. They were all pulled onto the walkway and assembled in a pile. The hoods were all lowered, and Trem looked over the Atemu, all of various ages, all male. A bus of football fans collided with a car on a winding country road, losing control on a corner, sending the bus and car off a great height and into the valley below. A perfect collection for the Farah. Trem walked up to one of the Atemu, a large bald-headed man. He picked up the lifeless body and looked it over. The sisters approached but halted at Trem's silent command. The lifeless ghost's eyes shot open. Once there was a deep brown, now were blank, with no features whatsoever. Trem stepped back as the body convulsed. The ghost bent over as its spine burst out from its back, snapping in half, leaving the front half of the body limp and dangling. The jaw came loose at the joints, and what was left hanging with sharp teeth formed and burst out of its gums. Tremely clapped her hands together. "This is so cool," she chuckled out loud. The pile of ghosts began to burst into life once again, their bodies twisting and turning into Farah, each becoming something monstrous and inhuman. Trem took the first one by the head and locked soulless black eyes to soulless blank eyes. "Go home," he ordered, and turned to Tremelaw. "You remember where the Ishtar gate portal is?" When she nodded a response, he continued, "Keep these aside for now. Tremelan, your sister and I will enter the manor house and make sure the Ishtar gate is active. When I give the command, send them through. Understood?" "Yes, sir," came the two responses. Trem let the Farah out of sight, the others standing aimless. Farah created in this way were generally less hostile to those who created them. Some inbuilt mechanism with the Farah, or maybe self-defense for the Manzazu. What good is creating a vile beast that attacks you as soon as you birth it? "Tremelaw, come with me." Trem led his protege away from the group, while the other two kept an eye on the Farah. Turning a corner, he stopped and leaned against a wall. Tremelaw watched him with a slight concerned look on her eyes. "You can remove your mask here. We are in private." Tremelaw shook her head. "No, sir. While we carry out your will, we will remain masked." Trem knew he taught her well. "Now to business. When I die, for the final time, I want you to take over. You're the strongest, oldest, and most mature. I know you won't disappoint me. You've proven yourself time and time again." His voice lowered, taking his gnarled hand with its decaying fingernails and placing it over her shoulder. "I also want you to be the one to end me. Will you do it?" Tremelaw should have answered instantly. She wanted to, but she found the words hard to get out. It had been so long since they saved him. He really was like a father figure to them all, so the thought of having to be the one to kill him felt wrong. She would have been apathetic about it, but she couldn't help but feel something. Deep down, she didn't want to do it. Who would? She felt Trem's hand move from her shoulder to her masked face. "Tremelaw, will you make me proud?" Tremelaw took his hand and closed her eyes. "Yes, sir," she responded. She needed to stifle these emotions if she was going to follow his orders to the letter. Trem's hand returned to his side. "Good. Now let us return to the others." When they walked back, they found Tremely looking one of the Farah over, poking its disfigured form while Tremelan was there in her own little world. Noticing Treman, they both snapped to attention. With Tremelaw by his side, it was obvious what was coming for the two sisters. "The time is now. This is where I leave you free." His tone was almost matter-of-fact, were it not for a slight voice break, no doubt due to the fact that one of his bones in his neck was giving out, leaving his head on a tilted angle held up by his shoulders. "Since this time will be the last chance I have to say it, I want you three to know I am proud of your progress these past few decades." He turned to Tremely first. "Tremely,
Your strength with your axe is undeniable. You will be a force to be reckoned with, but in order to achieve your peak, you must learn to focus. Hone in that energy and use it in bursts. And you, along with your sisters, will win many victories in the future.
Tremley responded with a quiet but respectable bow of thanks. Of course, what she really wanted to do was get emotional and actually feel sad he was going, but she had to keep a straight face. One of the advantages of the masks, the enemy can't see that you're scared. Tremor moved over to Tremelan, whose face was still totally obscured by the hood and full mask.
Tremelan, you are unfeeling in battle. It will serve you well in the conflicts to come. With time, your skills will be second to none. Remember to keep practicing your vision and use close-quarter combat.
Tremelan returned the bow that Tremley had given.
When you win your first victory, follow the plan we discussed. But once you eliminate my granddaughter and her human pet, you should allow yourself a moment of rest. I want you free to lift a glass to your achievements. And to me.
Tremor spoke up for the first time in a while. We shall, rest assured. He gave one last look at the sisters, and in a moment of stillness, he turned on his heels and began his journey to the decrepit old sidings and ventured back to the manor. There's more, but you'll have to buy it. Now, I just want to, just a little for context sakes, basically what happened was the three sisters and Treman both had a boat full of human souls that were coming in to go to the afterlife. But what they did instead was intercept it and basically, kill the souls that were in there. I know it's like, well, they're dead, how can they be killed? Well, if they don't make it to the afterlife, then they turn into vicious monsters. And that's part of their plan for book 3. No, it isn't. Book 1. I see many people have been having a conversation. Let's see what's going on here. Oh, good use of masterminding Danganronpa there. This is all very interesting, actually. I'm glad that some people are actually using this as a way to expand on their own work as well. I'm glad everyone's finding the emotions of this. So, as you see, they go from these into the antagonists for, let me find it, book 3. Book 2. Thank you very much, Shane. I have been told that my detail can be quite... full on, but I haven't reached the point where that's become an issue yet. I'd just like to sort of paint as clear a picture as I can so everyone can kind of see what's going on quite clearly, because again, as you saw from that, the names are quite similar. So how do you prove that these 3 characters with similar names look different? Well, one's got almost Bene Gesserit blue eyes, the other one's got bright pink hair, and the other one doesn't have eyes. That's a pretty good start. And I will say I've found the way of writing their always finding a way to make Edgewater better. I'll drink to that. Thank you. So, what was interesting was when it came to writing their weapons as well, because I wanted to make them as distinctive as possible. So, we've got spear that kind of comes out in a telescopic way. I think it splits in half in book 2 as well. Then you've got Tremely with her. I call it the anime axe, because if you've ever seen how they wield ones that are like twice as big as humans, because she's got incredible upper body strength for someone who's quite small. So she'll swing it around like a madman. And then the blind one, because she has a sort of Garnet from Steven Universe Future Vision, she can kind of see in small parts into the future enough to sort of know how to fight people. So she's got this cat's cradle of razor wire that she can use defensively or offensively. So, you know, God forbid if there's any kind of adaptation at any point, that will be very interesting to see how they focus on that. So that is the that is it for this live stream of talking about the villains and talking in general about the writing. And now that I've got this Streamlabs thing working, and now that it's working very well, I'm going to maybe look into maybe changing up the thing. I might experiment on this, but I might not make it monthly. I might make it fortnightly. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But I know I've still got more. I know not only do I have another chapter to read, just because that wasn't all of chapter 12. She sounds rad. Yeah, precognition. Yeah, I'll share more about her at some point. But yeah, the hopefully what I'm going to do at some point is transition from obviously still talking about the books, but because I know we've got a lot of people in here who are either writers themselves, like I know me, Sonny, Shane, we're all working our backsides off on our own projects, and I know a lot of people here are, and Bellum as well. I know she's got hers to be published at some point, but what I would like to do as well is still talk about the books, but also to sort of talk about writing in general, especially if anyone has any ambitions or curiosities about writing. Because my policy is, if you've got an idea, the only person that's stopping you writing it is yourself. Especially with the self-publication nowadays, with KDP and all this stuff. There's no better time really to get sunk into it than now. That's what I always encourage people to do. If they've got an idea, go for it. Doesn't matter how bizarre, doesn't matter how off the wall it is, there is always... Ooh, very interesting, Sonny. You tease me with your details. Yeah, the whole thing that I've been wanting to do with this is sort of keep discussing about writing in general. So if I sort of transition to maybe twice a month, then it might take more of a sort of generic writing thing. Then I'll sort of discuss themes, because I know the first one was a general sort of discussion about Trem in general, and this has more been about the villains. But all the way through that, obviously Q&A's on the writing process. But I might continue and do stuff, especially when it comes to stuff like talking about the publishing, because I know I've got a writing club live stream. I'd love to do that as well. And if I work out if there is a way to do more than one person at once, I might explore the idea of maybe doing a team up with someone we don't know. That's definitely in the future though, because now that I've got this sorted and the technical disaster that was yesterday is all sorted as well, and I don't want to obviously run before I can walk, but I'm going to be keeping an eye on live streams, Streamlabs, seeing what I can do on it, and then hopefully using that to inform where we go from here. As I said, I've also got I think about 3 Trem lore videos that should be coming up. I've already recorded one that I'm still in the process of editing. And yeah, so since this has been a success, I'll see how everyone feels for a... I'll see what everyone feels for maybe... So if we go back to it being on, what are we today? It's Sunday. If we go back to Saturdays, maybe the 23rd, but we'll see, because by then we should see both where the Streamlab things goes and the availability of people, because I'm very happy and impressed that we have 8 viewers. So yeah, that is the plan going forward, and I'll keep everyone updated. I'll be posting both in any of the Discord groups that I'm in, Twitter and Instagram. They'll all have their relevant live stream updates. And again, now that we have everything sorted, now that hopefully the days of technical difficulty are behind us, even no idea what this thing is. If I can get rid of that, that'll be a bonus. So yeah, that will hopefully be, barring any changes or anything cropping up, next time might be the 23rd. So I'll keep everyone updated. So yeah, thank you everyone for being a part of this, for hearing me ramble and going 10 minutes over stream. And thank you for hearing me out on our lovely antagonists, which I only came up with last minute because last night I was watching some Tangled the series and got quite into following a certain villain's, redeemed villain's story arc on there. I think Sunny knows what I'm talking about. And again, I'll possibly make a post at some point where you can also access the writer's stream, the my writing playlist as well. I'm always adding to that, so if anyone's interested, because I don't know how does one do Spotify. But yeah, so I shall round off now. I wanted to thank everyone for coming, and yeah, barring any other difficulties or anything popping up, tentative next stream will be yep, Sunny, Cass, yep, you know it. Yeah, tentative next stream will be the 23rd, but I will keep everyone again updated, and if anything pops up until then, you'll all be the first to know. So again, thank you for joining, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks again. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna see what's going on in Arrakis, and get a lot of viewing done, because we are still looking to have the shop open at some point. But until then, I'm gonna go and immerse myself. So again, thank you everyone, and I'll see you next time.